Aldrin.
Yes.
Kareem Alap.
Here.
Victoria Newport. Here. Valerie Penny Hernandez. Here. Rick Smith. Howard Sullivan.
Here.
Everybody can rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to start with public participation and recognition. And I just want to say how impressive this list is of athletes and different high school and middle school people we're honoring tonight. It's a lengthy list, and it's some very good things yet to come in this district. That's what I see here. So we're starting tonight with the middle school wrestling team. The DeKalb Middle School Wrestling Team competed in the IESA State Wrestling Tournament this past weekend. 11 wrestlers qualified to compete. Edward Castro, 65 pounds. Roy Burright, 75 pounds. Caden Caparat, 80 pounds. Danny R. Miranda, 85 pounds. Landon Simonson, 90 pounds. Jacob Luce, 29 pounds. Hussein Tahed, 100 pounds. Luke Shermack, 126 pounds. Kyler Caparat, 135 pounds. Bryson Bach, 145 pounds. And Gavin Ing, 185 pounds. In quarterfinals, Luke and Bryson lost very close matches and fought their way back to take third. Rory, Caden, and Kyler all made the state finals, with Caden and Kyler walking away with state championships. The team finished second and is the team finished in second and is the 2018 IESA state runner-up. Guys, you think coincidentally, you guys all have the same hair color?
Great. Congratulations. Congratulations. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Next, we have the recognition of DeKalb High School winter activities and athletics. This is the chess team. The DeKalb High School chess team qualified to represent the Northern Illinois Chess League at the Illinois State Tournament in Peoria. The students who participated are Daniel Alvarez, Christian Cooper, Henry Robinson, Dane Johnson, Robert Hansen, Keith Carvatz, Edward Santana Torres, and Jacob McCann, and Kevin Torres. We have the chess team here. No chess team? All right, well, congratulations. Next, we have boys basketball. The DHS boys basketball team finished the season with a 17-13 record against some of the toughest competition in the state. They won the Northern Illinois Big 12 Conference Championship for the fourth consecutive year with an 11-2 record. Senior Marcus Bobo and sophomore Isaiah Youngquist were named to the all-conference first team. Senior Michael Vallette and senior Matt Monavon were named special mention. The Daily Chronicle named Marcus and Isaiah on their all-area first team. Michael Vallette was selected to the second team, and Matt Monavon and senior Mikey Alford were named special mention. So,
Great group of guys. We played 9 state-ranked teams this year, so we really challenged ourselves, and we got a good 4 young players returning, so future looks bright. Our sophomore team and our freshman team also won conference.
Great.
That's part of the reason that the conference is breaking up. You guys just keep winning.
Have to do something about you.
Guys, play. Going. Great, everybody's covered conference.
Thanks, gentlemen. We appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thanks so much. Good job. Terrific. Thanks so much. Coach, thanks so much.
No, that's good. You get more.
Wrestling.
Wrestling?
Yep, wrestling.
High school wrestling.
High school wrestling?
Yeah.
High school wrestling?
Yeah. Nope. High school wrestling, no.
We'll go ahead and read theirs. The DeKalb wrestling team had a very successful season. The team finished 6th in the Barrington tournament, 2nd in the Hinsdale Central tournament, 1st in the Northern Illinois Big 12 Conference, and 2nd in the IHSA Regional. Wrestlers receiving all conference recognition were Fabian Lopez, Jacob Lindemann, Michael Clayton, Tucker Eikens, Christian Kamikas, Austin Johnson, Jacob Shermach, Logan Roach, and Vlad Donahue. Blake McGee was all conference honorable mention. Logan Roach and Cole Kelly also received all conference academic awards. The team qualified 9 wrestlers to the sectional tournament: Ben, Fabian, Tucker, Christian, Austin, Logan, Blah, and Gretman George. 4 wrestlers advanced to the state tournament: Fabian, Christian, Logan, and Blah. Fabian finished as the 126-pound 3A state champion, and Blah finished 3rd in the state at 195 pounds. The gymnastics team. The DeKalb Sycamore gymnastics team were Upstate 8 conference champions and regional champions. All conference individuals were Madison Hickey, Lauren Liam, and Emily Jovanovich. Laura Lehman placed 3rd at regionals on the uneven bars, balance beam, and floor. At sectionals, she placed 3rd on the uneven bars, and at state placed 5th on the bars. Miranda Majiskowski placed 3rd at regionals on vault, 4th on the uneven bars, and 5th on the all-around. Emily Jovanovich placed 2nd on the floor at regionals, and Sam Keating placed 5th on the balance beam. Madison Hickey at conference, vault, uneven bars, floor, and all-around champion. Regionals, vault, uneven bars, balance beam, floor, and all-around champion. Sectionals, vault champion, 2nd place on the balance beam, 4th and all-around, 4th on the uneven bars. And in the state competition, she was the vault champion and 4th place on the floor. Would any of you like to say anything?
Wow, for all your hard work.
Thank you, ladies.
Thanks so much for your hard work.
Great job.
It's tough stuff you guys do. Thanks so much. Thanks, ladies.
We have public comment. Members of the public who wish to speak to the board should complete a request card prior to the meeting. This section of the meeting will be reserved for comments from the public. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and criticism of individuals is not in order. All right. And next up, we have board committee reports and correspondence.
Three things.
Okay, go ahead, Rob.
First of all, on the 7th of March, early in the morning, I had an opportunity to sample for myself the breakfast available at Clinton Rosette School. And found it to be palatable. And the students there are pretty well orderly. They can ask some embarrassing questions like, can you get me tater tots? So I don't,
They ask you that question?
they want to know whether I can, as a board member, can force tater tots to be brought back onto the menu.
So you made a point, you brought it up.
Yeah, now it's here. The communication committee met yesterday. Jeff and I were both in there, and they're working on getting things organized in relation to social media. So we have some changes coming in what our actual social media presence is likely to be. And I had the opportunity to attend the student walkout on the 14th at exactly 10 o'clock. I wasn't able to be there at 10. I was there by about 10:05 and found a lot of students outside being quiet. The quiet spoke pretty loudly. So they did a great job, and I appreciate their efforts.
I'd like to just add in relation to that, communication being part of what's going on is that we are having each school come up with someone to voice out to the press and to get communications liaison. And that's moving forward, and apparently they have that in hand. It seems to be moving forward as far as coming up with people to be in charge of making known to the public the events of what's going on in each school, and communicating to, being the person, the liaison for those schools. So we seem to be moving forward in that regard. And thank you guys. There's a lot of effort being put on by individuals and by Ben and his team to do that. So it's really, they're to be commended for making that move forward. And also, of course, the principals. Thank you, guys.
Anything else?
Yeah, I'll say a few things about Safety Task Force met on the 12th. I won't say much because Tammy is here tonight and going to make a presentation on a lot of what was talked about. But I'll say a few things here as to what was covered. One of the things were the cameras, various cameras, particularly at the high school. I think she'll cover that, some probably during the presentation. Various types of lockdowns. One thing I thought was rather interesting was discussed, and that was the differences, or at least to me it was the differences between how we manage safety, lockdowns, intruders, and drills and training and so on for things that happen at the school versus things that happen on our buses. So that is something that the Safety Task Force and Jason for First Student and Tammy and our staff here are dealing with. There does appear to be a difference in how you manage this stuff. I'm not deep into it, but I was glad to learn a little bit about how it's done. And of course, our school resource officers had a great deal of input in that sort of thing as well. Finally, I'll finish with this. One thing that we are going to look at in the future is a secure entrance for the ELDC over at Huntley. That right now is not very secure and probably could be repaired. I think Tammy came up with a number on 20. Are you going to say anything about that, Tammy, during the safety presentation? that's for a future date. That's down the road a bit. But I just wanted the board to know that that's coming. That's another expense, another issue, and it's, I think we've secured every other entrance, right, Tammy, in the school system so far, all our buildings. So that would be the last one. So anyway, yeah, that's just a very quick review of what happened at STEP. And Tammy will bring her presentation a bit.
Anybody else? Okay. Also want to mention that there is an insurance meeting tomorrow at 3:30 that has been posted, so all board members can go and listen to the presentations that are taking place. We're bringing in 3 companies to go through some benefits packages for us tomorrow at 3:30. So anybody who would like to be there can be from the board. 3:30 in the board.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, we'll move on to presentations, tip review, and this is Miss Cynthia Carpenter and Gina Galuzzo. This is a discussion information presentation.
I have Gina Galuzzo here. These are legal counsel that helps us with intergovernmental agreements that we have with the city, as well as he's been doing some research and the progress that the city is in terms of the TIFs and the ones that are expiring, and then also the potential of looking at a new TIF. So he's going to give a quick update on that.
Thank you. I'm here just to give you a brief overview on TIF and what is happening currently with the City of Dekalb. Just for those of you that may not know, the way a TIF works is once a TIF is created, the value of properties in the TIF district is identified, and new tax dollars created off of increased value during the life of the TIF are placed into a segregated account that the city uses to be basically used for things that the statute allows. The goals of the TIF is to help them fortify and increase property values to eliminate blight and to create jobs. That's in essence what it's for. Basically eliminate jobs, eliminate blight, and create jobs. So those are the primary purposes. If we go to the next slide, what's going on in the City of Dekalb is there's a great opportunity for us to influence really how they close out these 2 TIFs and how to create a new one. There's a central area TIF district that's expiring in 2021, and there's a TIF district, TIF number 2, that expires at the end of this year. While that's happening, the city's contemplating creating a new TIF district called the Central Business District, and I've outlined that in red there. And you'll notice it predominantly takes up area within the central area TIF district. It takes a little bit of TIF number 2 and some land that's outside of both TIFs. And the idea there is that they're likely going to, if depending on their feasibility study, the goal would be to take those out of those TIFs now and then just create a new TIF, which would start a new clock ticking for those parcels for 23 years. Yes?
Looks like it's roughly the same shape. That's what you have superimposed on the right side is the old TIF district in the red. Is that
the red and what's in the line is the same area. So
right.
I'm not sure what the old TIF district was.
Right.
Are you saying that was an old prior TIF district?
Somewhat, yes.
Okay.
Somewhat. So this one's dying, this one's leaving, this one's going away, this TIF district is going away, and they're going to initiate a new one? Is that?
So the goal would be, I believe, and this is what we're going to have to discuss with them before they're planning on coming to present on April 17th here. So between now and then, Amy and I will be talking to them about next steps, or Cynthia and I, excuse me. But I think what their plan is to cut out within that red line those parcels. They can do that. They can amend their boundaries and eliminate those out of there and then recreate a new TIF. Now, there's some questions about that, as to tying those up for another 23 years. And I think part of their eligibility report will determine what's happened to those values. Have they not really taken off? Have they been stagnant or stayed low? And maybe they need new incentivization out there. Our goal is really to identify is how have they used TIF in the past? What's their goals to try to get this property fortified and to go into, increase property values there. And that's part of what we'll be talking to them between now and April as they move forward. But the good news is that you have 2 TIFs that are about to expire. There's a lot of money in both of those. The city has been distributing, consistent with an agreement with the school district, 50% of that increment out of the central area business TIF district itself. So to create a TIF, it has to be able to pass the but-for clause. They have eligibility clause. The eligibility but-for. And so now we have an area that we're saying won't develop unless we TIF it, but some of it's already been under a TIF. And coming off, the AV is lower.
Well, part of the,
So I guess my question is, the argument going in at one time 23 years ago was, but for TIF, this area won't develop. And now we're coming back and saying, but for another TIF, it won't develop.
I agree. I think there are a lot of questions before they move forward. I think the board, from what I understand, talking to Cynthia, there's questions even among the council. Should we create the TIF? Should we not create the TIF? City council does. And I think that's one of the reasons why they want to engage us in dialogue as to how we feel about this and understand really what their goals are. There are eligibility requirements in creating a TIF. You know, it's blight, it's lost value. They have to meet, I think it's 5 of the 7 eligibility requirements. They've hired a consultant, that's Pete Friedman, who's in the process of creating a report to determine if they believe it's eligible to create a TIF. And then they should give the dollars to developers if they feel, but for the incentive, the developers utilizing those dollars. But there's other things they could use the dollars for, obviously public infrastructure improvements there, if they feel they need other public infrastructure improvements in order to incentivize those areas further.
Yeah, but isn't one of the original purposes of the legislation for TIF to try and bring in private money into an area? I mean, Dekalb seems to, and here I am on the school board saying this, right? We would stand to perhaps gain something from a TIF. But
And that's the question, is there a benefit to it?
Exactly, yeah. You know, and we get a surplus, they have paid us a surplus over some years of these existing TIFs. But getting back to the original intent, I think the legislative intent, as I read it at least years ago, was to try and improve, you know, make it a bigger game, you know, so more people out in the private enterprise world would bring their resources, bring their funds in, you know, and create a much higher value eventually. And if you don't allow that to happen, if you, for instance, choose to fix City Hall, or you choose to build a new school building, or something to that effect, a government or a public use sort of TIF purpose, then that would perhaps squeeze out some of the funds that could be granted to a private enterprise, that then perhaps over the long run would increase the value further. So I think there's that push-pull, you know, what do we know about how the city sees it from that point of view?
You're absolutely, if I can respond, you're absolutely right about that, which is why in the annual TIF reports, the state requires them to identify, you know, what the private investment's been in addition to public investment. Because you do want to leverage your public dollars, get private investment to really boost up those property values and create jobs. And you're absolutely right. There are certain communities that use TIF more for maintenance projects or infrastructure projects that may not get that same boost because they're not incentivizing the right projects. And that's part of the discussion I think we should have as we move forward and understand what their goals are and their plans for the TIF. So I think that's part of what we want to talk about and why the city council itself is asking them on itself, at least in some of the memos that I've seen dating from September and January, which is how have we used it in the past, how would we use this go forward to basically try to leverage those public dollars to get more private investment, to get a higher return on investment of tax dollars.
Right, so that's really, in a sense, our position in this is to, is not to argue against the TIF necessarily, but to say, if you do create a TIF, let's do something that we will ultimately benefit from by yielding some sort of
larger amounts of tax dollars that would go to us.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ways to look at it, absolutely, is increase the AV, better jobs for our citizens, which, families and kids that come to our schools being from a household with jobs better. But yes, I think that's the approach, because stopping the TIF, the only way you can really object to have a TIF created, your one chance is really the joint review board. But the joint review board isn't just to say, I want no, the law is very clear. You can only vote against it to the joint review board if you believe they haven't met the criteria for creating a TIF. So unless there's some other reason why they shouldn't be allowed to create a TIF, the school district's ability to stop a TIF is to say they haven't met the eligibility requirements, which still have an expert that will likely say they do when they move forward. But really politically, especially now if they're teetering kind of go, no-go on this TIF, it's really political pressure and letting them know how you feel about it, what the goals are. The good news is, I think there have been in the last 7 years distributed about 11 $2.8 million in the school district in surplus, which arguably if the TIF wasn't there, you'd get anyway, obviously. And we had an IGA entered into, I think, a couple of years ago, which made a couple $1 million available out of the TIF for some improvements in some of our schools.
But Cindy, you had on your figure that we were going to, because of the rollout or the retirement of that TIF, that we were going to pick up additional cash. Did you not?
Yeah, in the future. So in 2018, the yellow part, that's the one that comes due this year. So we'll have access to those dollars in 2019 tax levy year. You can see here that there's only a little piece that they're thinking of doing that with. So actually, those dollars would come to us, that increment, besides that little yellow.
A pretty
piece.
large portion of it.
Yeah, almost all of it, it looks
Right,
like.
right.
Then also the green, which expires in 2021, we won't see that until the 2022 levy year, which won't be until the 2023 budget year. But you can see there that most of that is going to expire except for what they're carving out within the red area. So a big chunk of that's still going to come off.
And that's as I recall from your figures, that's a fairly large figure.
Yeah, that's about 50 million-ish.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a large figure.
Right, and so what we just don't know yet is of that red part, how much, what's the value of that? Because the parcels within that area, some have gone up since the increment was put into place. Some have actually gone down, so the net of it might be somewhat small. So actually, we're just not really sure what that looks like until they have that study done, so we can really see the dollars.
Gene, I have a question. If the
Thank
council, if the council decides to go forward with this, as obviously the new tip will be put in place and retiring both the yellow and the green tips, do we capture for 1 year, or does it automatic what's in the red, or does that automatically roll into the new tip?
So as this happens, it doesn't all happen in the same year. So I would envision, obviously, TIF number 2 will come off regardless of what they do, the yellow.
Yes.
At the end of this year, it'll be done, and the 2019 dollars collected in 20, you'll start collecting those. But if they do what's in the red boundary this year, whatever, it doesn't mean that you're going to collect anything outside of those boundaries until those TIFs naturally expire. But what's within the red boundary, if they do create the TIF, what they do is they bring it out of the TIF, so it resets the EAV, the base EAV for the TIF. So you will then, if, as Cindy said, we don't know yet if those EAVs are higher, lower, or a wash. So if it's higher, in overall higher, we will collect that higher amount for the life of the new TIF. It's not just a 1 year deal, but that'll be your new base EAV. We have to, they have these numbers, you just have to get them from them. I'm sure they have an EAV for each of those pins within that boundary. Right. And we just have to acquire that. And then we'll be able to tell you how you look.
So right now, as we said, we don't know whether or not it's a net loss gain or.
Now, but what we do know is we do know the last TIF report, which was in fiscal year 16 that we have pulled off the state's website, it looked like they were generating about $6.3 million a year in increment out of the green TIF, the central area, and about 1.2 million out of the yellow TIF, which is the one that's going to expire sooner. And that's how much increment they're generating out of those. They're distributing about half of the green increments. They're distributing about $3.2 million a year, which goes to all the taxing bodies. That one's a little bit unique. I have another slide. I'm just talking through it. I think it helps everybody look at the picture as I'm going through it. But that one's a little unique because the green one was created back in 1986 when we were able to collect not only property taxes, but also sales tax increments from the state and from the city. So they're actually, when they distribute surplus, they've been sending in recent years a portion of it back to the state and city also, a portion.
You mentioned that right now taxing bodies can't intervene. Is there pending legislation that could potentially change that?
There's a lot of pending legislation out there, and there's a TIF task force currently meeting on TIF based on when the school funding formula was changed. They created this TIF task force because they felt a lot of communities or a lot of places like the city of Chicago that felt were gaining the general state aid funding formula because the money coming out of the TIF isn't counted as local available resources in the general state aid funding formula. So a lot of communities were working with their school districts like Chicago, and they were making those dollars back available to the school district while the school district was still receiving increased general state aid as if those dollars weren't available. So they do have a task force. From my indication, I'm on the executive committee of the Tax Increment Association, and I've talked to my representatives on that task force. I don't see a lot of changes coming out of that. I think there's gonna be some minor tweaks, what I hear here and there out of that task force, but I don't see a lot of major changes coming out of that.
Well, they were also potentially like receiving increment.
You think?
They also were potentially receiving part of the increment as well.
Who's that?
Those in large tipped areas.
Oh, yeah, so what,
So they see an increase in GSA because of the amount of tipped EAV. So their formula changes. Yet, like if, in our case, we received, we had some of the increment that was coming back to the school district for certain projects. So you could almost argue that districts that had large tipped areas, or if they have the right agreement, local municipal agreement, were double dipping.
correct. And, the argument could be made, and I haven't done the math, it'd be difficult to do the math at this point, but in the tip, like the green tip, where you're receiving, let's say, half of the surplus distribution, the question is, if the tip wasn't there, would you be about in the same position because you're getting the general state aid funding formula also? You might be about a dead even when that tip expires because your general state aid will come down and the surplus, the rest of the half of the surplus to be distributed to it.
Well, that brings us, can I jump in?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So the question that I have is ultimately, really is pretty much what you just talked about. Our position is, number one, as I understand it, that we're not able to really advocate for ourselves in this regard, go to them about, officially go to them and talk to them about what would be best for us.
Oh, no, they're willing to do that. School districts come forward and ask us to talk to them.
Right.
And I think there's a couple of reasons why, and I don't want to get into too much detail during the meeting, but there are things we could try to get them to agree to that would be net cash beneficial to the district on an annual basis for remaining like these tips.
Right.
And Cindy and I talked about that offline, and Jamie and Cindy and I will likely go talk to the school district between now and the time they come here in April to try to talk about
the city,
excuse me, to talk about some of those things we'd like to see.
sure.
And then we'd like to hear from them about, as you indicated, this tip, what's your plan, what's your goal on that tip, to determine if it's something we want to support or not. Are they would they agree to continue a surplus distribution like they have been doing? Would we want that?
Which you would say was a wash.
It's close to close, but I'd want to see what the state formula is looking like this year. When they revamp that state formula, it's been difficult to figure out how that's going to work with the school districts, I think. I don't think it changed how they look at available resources for the TIF. I think it did change how they look at available resources for the enterprise zones and the abatements. I think that might have been an inadvertent change on their part, but it does have some direct consequences on us. We just haven't figured all those out yet. I think the school board, the school association itself has been trying to figure out how the funding formula is going to work out. Maybe they have in recent months or.
Not really, no.
Okay.
So our position is advocate for what is best for us.
I think you do. I think tips in general,
Seems reasonable.
I think tips in general are a good thing if you structure them correctly, you can put the right powers. It's like anything. A car is a good tool, but if you put a drunk behind the car, it's not a good tool. So if we can put some collars on the tip and how they use the tip, and make sure they're utilizing it beneficially, and negotiate some agreement with the school district like you have with some of your other deals, it might be a positive thing to be behind.
And if they'll probably go for that if it's mutually beneficial.
Absolutely. Especially now, I think they're having some internal issues about whether they should do it or not do it.
Yeah, sorry, I keep jumping in.
So another interesting angle on this that I thought of long
Thank
ago
you.
before I was on the school board is that because 428 includes DeKalb and Portland and Malta, when you have a TIF in DeKalb, you reduce the flow of money to the school district, potentially at least for a time, with the hope of a gain, later when the TIF is no longer in force, or perhaps the surplus distribution. But the two outlying communities here, in our case example, Portland and Malta, we have schools there, and those folks may or may not see any equalized assessed valuation increase as a result of the TIF. Now, if you were talking about sales tax, it might make more difference, but that's no longer the case, right?
Well, the TIF only impacts within the boundaries of the TIF. So if Portland's not part of the screen, part of the yellow TIF, let's say TIF 2, and that's only school
Right.
district 428,
then the improvements and the expenditures of those money by the city are only within that area.
Right.
So they should directly, they're impacting you only, they're not impacting them one way.
Yeah, but they are impacting the outliers, the two districts, or rather the two cities in this case, or towns, in the sense that they will go without, just like the DeKalb schools will go without. But what otherwise might have come in tax revenue, they will go without for some period of time. And yet, in the long run, they won't see an increase in their EAV, their property, their business profits, and so on.
What you're saying
because
is-
they're not in the TIF district, and the TIF monies can only be spent within the TIF district. So, for instance, we could in fact put a new roof on a school here in DeKalb if it was in the TIF district, but not take any of that TIF money and put a new roof on Cortland or Malta.
Just because I'm missing the point, how would they go without if they're not in the boundaries?
I think the point is that all the money is going into one pot. That, our school district budget includes our Malta school, includes our Cortland school.
Oh, I see.
Then
Our expenses are across 3 towns,
I get you, yes.
but the profits accrue to DeKalb only, and perhaps some of that to the schools if that's one of the projects.
Although the surplus we receive is unencumbered, so with that goes
Good
into our
point.
general fund. So we do technically use that.
If there's a surplus granted.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
That's where we look.
Of course, a TIF is indeed a loss to the school district. The school district agrees to accept less money, and that tax money goes to the TIF district in order to try to improve things for a while. But we're also in a situation where a pending change of the state constitution may result in a tax structure change such that we have progressive taxes rather than conventional income taxes, which would allow us to reduce property tax in general, and the property tax portion of what we get from our property taxes will ultimately be reduced. So it's probably a pretty risky venture to agree to a TIF because we're putting the money down up front, and as times change and the systems change, we're ultimately not going to get it back from our property taxes anymore because people will be paying less property taxes.
can I answer that or
You can try.
speak to that? I'll try. But also the theory is that if a TIF intervention isn't made on that certain area, and we'll use the red as an example, that it's just going to continue to deteriorate. So we're actually in essence going to continue to lose EAV because we're not intervening on those properties. And we, after the first year, after they establish what the baseline EAV is of the TIF, then we're not losing money from that point on. Any growth of EAV within the TIF district, then that increment is used to put back in and continue to grow businesses and refurbish buildings, et cetera, so they don't continue to decline. Yes, we don't see the new growth of EAV within the TIF, but we don't lose any EAV from what that initial established baseline is. And there's also an argument that there's ancillary benefit that even properties just outside of the TIF district will increase in value, which in essence helps us because we can still capture that. Is that?
You're spot on, and I think the argument that everybody always gets hung up on is the but-for is, would this development have come even if they didn't incentivize it? Remember, the school district, the city will take the dollars out of the TIF fund, and it will incentivize people to invest to build new factories or new businesses, which will increase that EAV for them to respend or maybe to give part of it back to them. So the argument a lot of times is the but-for is, would this have come even without the incentive? I mean, that's where the difficult part comes in. If they don't utilize the money to incentivize them, and they don't utilize it for any of the other projects, they can distribute it as surplus. I mean, the law says unless you have it earmarked for something, you should distribute it to surplus, which is why they have been distributed to surplus. And even at the end of these TIFs, depending on the balances in them, those need to be paid out as surplus unless there are some projects already identified that they need to wrap up with the use of those funds. And that's part of what we'll be talking about also. What are your current balances? What are your plans for use of those funds? You've been distributing funds. How will you be distributing them? I mean, there's obviously an economic impact to us, not getting too much detail, whether they distribute either from one of those TIFs and not the other. Because on one of them, they're sending some money back to the state for sales tax. So
that's part of what we've spoken about and we'll be speaking to the city about also.
If I'm reading that correctly,
The state's already changing the funding formula in a way that's going to make it more reliable on make the district more reliant on a larger GSA coming from the state, so that we can actually start to reduce taxes based on property.
If they can fund it.
lots of ifs there.
I mean, the formula's in place, is the funding in place.
Yeah, I think we have to work off of what we know today with regard to the TIF. And if we can negotiate a fair deal and a good deal for us, I think that's probably a good thing for us.
So do we want to give them permission from the board for Jamie, Cindy, and, to go back to the city and have some discussion?
Absolutely.
And I would say, is there a way to get from the city a spreadsheet or some sort of description of how the existing TIFs over the last, it's actually been 46 years, right? No, not 46, 23 plus one extension. Now, how those did, how well did they perform? Did they achieve the goals that were initially set? Is there some way that we can get them to
And I think that
talk about
study,
that?
their study's gonna show that, but I have asked for that.
Okay, great.
Within why, especially in the red area, what does that look like? What is that net? Because it could be, like you said, a lot less than we think.
Yeah.
Or maybe those are more negative than the ones outside are positive.
Jamie, critical to what you just said is, or hinging, the success of it hinges upon their successful management of their TIF money within their district. I mean, the redistribution of that money, whether it's effective or whether it's been frittered away, which is what that study is going to give you of the past performance of the TIF that they've got. It looks like a downtown TIF.
Yes, yeah, right.
So that really is no manufacturing, no, that's really just
basically retail.
cosmetic and retail.
All right.
We'll get more updates.
Good, but we have a consensus that
Yeah, start.
If I can,
Continue the discussion.
they have a couple of memos they put out that we read, letters on that. Going back historically, they've done some of that. I'm not comfortable with, it's hard finding that level of detail.
Sure.
And that's part of the problems with the annual reports from the state. They're pretty generic. And from a taxing body such as yourself, you really don't know what's going on unless you dig through a lot of stuff and figure it out, and that's a lot of time. Which I think one of the things we should talk about is go forward reporting from them, maybe above and beyond what the state law requires, so that we kind of get a good x-ray, if you will, of how the TIF's doing and what we're incentivizing and where the dollars are going.
Well, I think it'd be really interesting to look at the percentage of private enterprise that was brought in versus projects that are government related of some sort, right? Which really doesn't bring any new money in.
And that's part of the debate is, but then one of their memos, and I've seen this in other communities I've gone into, is some people argue that placemaking is important. Creating a sense of place, helping, whether it's with, a library or the Egyptian theater or some other project where it may not bring a lot of dollars in, but it helps the area from continuing to deteriorate so that people want to be there, and it creates a hub of activity.
Right. And that's hard to,
Can I make a
that's hard to
recommendation?
quantify.
Great questions, great points. If you can email your questions and items that you might want to see from the city when they come next month, you email them to myself or Cindy, and when we start to have meetings, we can include those.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you so much.
Next, we have changing how we meet the needs of our middle school ELA students, and this is a discussion and informational presentation.
Good evening. Before we get started, I would like to introduce two teachers that have joined as part of this presentation tonight. This is Kyra Stewart and Katie Bragla. They are both 7th grade ELA teachers in Huntley Middle School. And they've agreed to help us with this presentation tonight, changing how we meet the needs of middle school ELA students. In this presentation, we're going to describe for you what the present situation is with regular and advanced classes of English language arts at the middle school. And then we're going to propose to changes that could bring equity and enhanced quality for all ELA students. So at present, at the middle school, ELA is blocked, which means there's 2 periods equaling 88 minutes. Based on MAC testing, teacher ratings, students are placed in either regular language arts or advanced language arts. Both regular and advanced share the same core curriculum. They have the same core curriculum and the same core writing curriculum. And then it is differentiated through the novel selections that they read and the depth of writing tasks.
So at the beginning of this year, excuse me, at the beginning of this year, the language arts teachers came to us, and what they noticed is in the scheduling there was really 2 problems. There was a large discrepancy in the class size that they saw, so their advanced classes were much larger than their on-level classes, and then also the kids really were tracked as they went through their school day, and that's you know, has to do with the double block of math, double block of reading, just the way that it's set up. Kids are really kind of move their way out. We ran some numbers on the average class size for advanced is over 32 right now, and that's both at Rosetta and Huntley. That average class size is very large compared to the on-level class. The average class size right now is 20. There are some classes right now in the district of the on-level classes that are running at 11 or 12 students. It's quite discrepant. So, and really the reason for that is it's not just the advanced classes. It does trickle down, but it's really the core replacement classes. So you've heard of programs like Read 180 and language and things like that for special programs for kids who struggle. Those kids are really, that's what we call core replacement. So they're taken out of that on-level class or out of that advanced class, and that's why you see a real big discrepancy as well as kids being tracked throughout their day.
I don't understand what track throughout their day is.
So, if kids that would be considered advanced students, they travel together throughout their entire day, as well as kids with similar learning profiles travel throughout their day. So, special education students largely have the exact same classes with the exact same kids and travel throughout the day.
We call that something a little different, but so tracking is really group moving,
and there's really no branches in the tree when they go throughout their day. They travel really together. So we're really looking for low-hanging fruit. When the teachers came to us and said, "What can we do about this?" Went through a number of different options, and these are the solutions that we came up with. So the first thing we could do is we could hire additional FTE to have a teacher that basically runs those advanced classes the way that they should be, in addition to purchasing new materials and you know, you heard Vicki mention that the materials are the same. We would have to purchase new materials for that. We could get rid of core replacement programs. If we did that, that's really going to impact our struggling readers the most, as well as our ELL students, as well as our special education students who are going to be impacted pretty significantly by that.
Again, I'm sorry,
Yes,
again,
no,
full replacement program means?
It means kids that, it's a reading intervention in which kids are pulled from the on-level class and they're housed in a different class. So their class is even
For people that struggle.
correct. And that's for that's kids that struggle for language needs or language needs. That's special education students, and that's non-special education students who are pulled from the on-level classes that I mentioned earlier into a smaller reading intervention.
So theoretically, a core replacement, a couple or 3 core replacement people could be pulled out of an 11-person class, leaving 8 people in that class.
And really, it's the reason why it's 11 that I mentioned earlier is because that class without the core replacement would be 20-something. So it's really several kids are being pulled, and that's the result.
So that's the result of a core replacement.
Correct.
11.
Correct.
Very unbalanced class.
Right. Or we could restructure, which is what we're suggesting tonight, or we could leave it as it is, and just with the we really feel like the, with the kind of core or grassroots, campaign that the teachers are really suggesting that something really needs to be done. So our recommendation is going to be number 3.
So we really do need to restructure middle school ELA through placing advanced ELA students into the regular language arts classes. With restructuring, the average class size for middle school ELA becomes 23.4. And the way we came up with these numbers is we literally went through the building principals, excuse me, both buildings, Jamie and myself, we looked through all the rosters, and that's really when you start to see the unfolding of just how discrepant the enrollment in these classes are. And so by restructuring, the average class size for middle school ELA becomes about somewhere between 23 and 24 students, which means there's going to be an improved teacher-student ratio for the advanced students, because right now those advanced sections are very, very large. And, and so that improves that teacher-student ratio. It does not negatively impact the regular students in any way, shape, or form. And the 2 teachers who are here tonight will also speak to that. The core curriculum already exists, and with differentiation in place, because over the last 4 years, the ELA teachers at the middle school have been developing materials based on the core curriculum to meet the needs of those advanced students. And then the writing program, which you all approved last year, has enough depth and breadth to it that will allow them to literally differentiate the writing curriculum as well. And then along the way, different novel studies for different lexile levels have been being developed as well. So, and then finally, the ELA placement in middle school does not impact future enrollment into honors classes at the high school, not at all. The criteria used to place students into freshman honors is based upon math and a writing sample.
I have a question.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So essentially what you're saying is you're going to take, you're no longer going to have that advanced group in classes in and of itself.
Right.
And you're going to then move them into the core class and have an advanced section, or have an advanced, like some people are going to be doing some advanced work within the core class, correct?
Correct.
Now, I have 2 questions. One is the 32 on the advanced class, is that impacting their performance? The 32, in other words, are they being impacted by a higher number of students in the class? Are their grades being impacted? Is their performance being impacted at all?
If you're talking about performance in terms of grades
By the advanced group.
students, I would say if you looked at their grades, probably not. But what is impacted in a climate of a classroom that has 32, 33, in more cases 35 students, the intentionality and the quality of the instruction is just not able to be there because of the size of the class.
But you're giving that up when you move, in other words,
Up.
to a certain extent, what you're saying is now you've got this core group, they're all working on the same things, they're all working with the same kinds of criteria. Now you're moving into a mixed class, correct?
Right.
They're mixed in any number of different ways. Now essentially it's no longer an advanced class. It's really got some, sort of put kind of pockets of advanced, but you're really not talking about an advanced class.
You are correct. What we are advocating for is what we call heterogeneous mix of students, which we weren't going to get into it tonight, but I can share with you the research. I've prepared a document with a lot of hyperlinks, but in light of the length of our board meeting and the presentations, I'd be glad to share that with you. But in actuality, students across the board benefit from that heterogeneous grouping rather than consistently separating advanced from regular. It doesn't hurt the groups. If anything, it enhances them.
You have data on that.
I have studies that I will be glad to share that with you. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? I'm going to speak as someone who's been in education for a while, and I have a student, my own children, go through public education, and the train of thought makes so much sense. If you have a group of students who are advanced, You want to bring them together and meet those needs and meet them with those instructional levels and those opportunities so that we're really advancing them. Just as up here, logic sense says to us, we should be, grouping the kids who are really struggling and making sure we're meeting their needs. But what the research is telling us, and actually it's been research over the last 30 years, is telling us that when we do that, we actually stifle both groups, that the groups actually benefit from that heterogeneous grouping, but understanding that within the classroom, there's differentiation going on. And that is key to making this piece work. And I think maybe this might be a great juncture because I'm gonna let Katie and Kyra speak to why our teachers across both buildings and our instructional coaches feel so strongly that this is what's the best thing for our students. So Kyra, did you
just kind of talk a little bit about why we support this proposal. Students really learn best from other students. And in our current model, we have students really aren't having the opportunities to hear from a wide variety of their peers. If we move to heterogeneous classes, students would have many opportunities to be exposed to and challenged by classmates' thoughts at all levels of academic success, instead of only being molded by students at their own level. They would also be able to build a sense of community within the classrooms and improve student attitudes about learning and schoolwork. Heterogeneous grouping also allows advanced students to mentor their peers. On-level students will be exposed to higher level thinking with the hopes of making significant academic gains, and all students will be able to interact as a group to understand the concepts that are being taught. As teachers, we would be able to provide more equitable experiences for all of our learners. We would still be able to individualize curriculum, but we would also be able to provide a differentiated small group instruction experience as well. With the help of MAP scores and our various other tools that we use, we would be able to utilize flexible grouping in our classes to teach those concepts. And that's one of the reasons that I truly support this plan.
One of the reasons that I also support it is that it can create a wider variety of the abilities across the classroom. We can use it as a tool to create more meaningful and constructive dialogue with all the students. And each class needs kind of that higher level and more of a surface level to bring not only those abstract thoughts out, but also the importance of the concrete level still being kind of a forefront in their education. For the struggling learners, at times, the higher level thinking students, they help create and model a very insightful conversation that sometimes can be challenging for some of our struggling learners. And a lot of our higher learners actually benefit from teaching and modeling for those students that need the extra help. There might be a way that you can explain it that another student will say, wow, I understand, thank you for explaining that. And sometimes you need them to assist each other to really pull each other up. And speaking on some of my own experiences this year, Ms. Hutzler had mentioned MAP scores, and one of the classes that I saw the most growth in was the most heterogeneous and mainstream group. They had the most growth in all of their MAP scores this past testing period. And it's because of the dialogue we have, the questions they ask. They're not afraid to challenge each other when it's more heterogeneous and mixed together. And I think of it as kind of like a puzzle. You have, your corner pieces and then the things in the middle. And sure, if you put all the corner pieces together, you have a nice box, but you don't have the whole picture. And in the middle, you mix those in, and sometimes, you don't know where a certain piece fits or how it's all going to work together. But until they all come together, you don't see the whole beautiful picture. And I think that's very symbolic of our students all coming together. And if the goal is to have this big picture, and I'm looking at our mission statement to prepare students to reach their fullest potential as lifelong learners, in the real world, we're all together, and we need to know how to work together, listen to each other, build each other up, and help each other. And by combining these groups of learners, I think that's how we're going to best meet that goal.
If you have a question, and maybe this is in the program later, as we looked at placement into high school, were all of the advanced students placing into honors English and advanced English, or what was the approximate breakdown?
It was less than 50%, and I can explain why. Remember when Tim was explaining earlier, Tammy, would you be so kind to go back a few slides where the big red numbers were? Right there, okay. So what happens here with this needing to, because of the limited FTE, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, because of limited FTE, when we're talking about the advanced classes, one of the things you have to understand is all the students who are in those advanced classes are not technically advanced. In other words, we set a threshold at 80%. So we're looking at the top 20% of students at a grade level. And we're looking at MAP scores, and we're also looking at teacher recommendations. And so those students are then placed into advanced. But we have to fill those sections. So what happens is you've got that top group that are put in advanced. Well, we can't leave the section empty because we got to fill our section. So the rest of the students who are put into advanced by most criteria aren't really truly advanced, but they're filling the section. So when you would talk to ELA teachers, they'll tell you that they really are mixed sections and are not really completely advanced. So then when you talk about that placement then to high school, they look at MAP data and they look at the writing sample. And so when we look at our advanced sections, which really are not purely advanced, less than 50%. And then the rest are kids that are regular kids. That what we're proposing will not impact that.
So the other 50% were kids who we hadn't identified as being in the honors track.
Correct.
So kids who were in the regular track, we'll say, or the 50% of the students who were testing into the honors courses were hadn't been recognized as honor students at high school or advanced students.
Right.
So really, our data shows that it was really 50-50. Okay.
So essentially, if I'm hearing this correctly, we're going to keep the honors class, is that correct? Or are we going to just abandon the honors issue?
At the middle school.
Honors is at the high school.
Honors is at the
Well,
high
I
school.
know, but advanced class.
Advanced
I'm sorry, I'm
is the
using the wrong word. So
Right.
the honor, the thing that you say advanced class, 32 there.
Mhm.
So are you going to keep the 32? I mean, you're not going to have it be 32. You're going to redistribute
Mhm.
those numbers.
Mhm.
But are you going to keep at 25 or 22 in advanced class?
No, because
So
Tammy
no
will
more.
be so.
Now it's just going to be completely abandoned. You're going to get rid of the advanced issue and put those within classes. Having a class within a class.
Right, the recommendation is that the advanced ELA student, the advanced ELA be restructured and that we fold it into the regular ELA.
And is that because it's not working or because of those numbers?
It is because for two reasons. One, because of those numbers, but two, ultimately, as you heard from the teachers and from Tim and myself, it's not what's best for students, either the advanced or the regular.
And that's documented by data that you have from which you're going to share.
Well, part of it is what I just shared.
Mhm.
50% of these kids don't make it into honors
Any-
in high school.
Right.
And 50% of our kids who weren't in the advanced classes are the kids that are backfilling those at the high school level. So the question is it working?
Is it productive?
Correct.
Yeah.
And the other part that I'll point out is, the district made a huge investment going 1-to-1. And the opportunity now to have this kind of concept in a classroom where you have, even within one group of 23 students, that you have students that are working on more advanced work, that you have students that have more advanced assignments because the teachers are pushing all students, but pushing the students who are working at the higher levels. They can go ahead and create not an advanced track, but more challenging work for those students who are ready to take that on.
Yeah,
So-
I'm not advocating against it, I'm just trying to get clear.
Right, and it's a different way of thinking about what's going on in the classroom than what we've always done. But I just wanted to speak to, for example, next month, we're bringing in our math consultants They're specifically going to be working with the middle school ELA teachers. And these teachers are phenomenal with their math data. The whole purpose of that workshop, it's a 3-hour workshop, to help teachers take their map data of their students and then plan differentiation within their classes. So that's going to be data driven. One of the other best practices when we start talking about differentiation, and I think it was Kyra that mentioned it, we talk about instead of having just always the same groups by ability, we talk about flexible grouping. So because we have all this rich data from MAP, we have teachers who are already utilizing it with additional professional development with differentiation, but also with our MAP consultants. Now the teachers can make those instructional material decisions based on the needs of the students because we have the data. So we're addressing the needs of multiple learners, but rather than separating them all throughout the day, we have them all in the same classroom.
Yeah, Jamie, you got into what I was going to ask about the Chromebooks, the one-to-one program, right? When that was brought to us and we decided to invest a lot of money, one of the things that was discussed or given to us as an example was a science class where, and I think it was middle school, you know, where the Chromebooks had been brought in on a pilot study, you know, and the very thing happened, what you just described, you know, where some of the advanced kids were teaching some of the kids in the middle, which freed up time for the teachers to actually teach some of the kids that weren't grasping it at all. Because it sounded fantastic, so I wanted to ask the teachers, how's that going in ELA? I mean, I heard that example a while ago, quite a while ago now, for math and science, but how are the Chromebooks, the one-to-one program working, you know, in the existing setup?
We use Google Classroom, so it's easy to push out different kinds of readings, different level readings, different types of choices for the kids to more so select their path of education, like what is my strength? What can I choose from, let's say, a pool of activities or lessons that best meets my needs, or which one best suits where they feel they can be successful. If something's too challenging, they can drop down to something maybe a tad easier. If something isn't easy enough.
So one of the
hard
things
enough.
we use is newsela.com, and it has different informational text in it. Within each text or reading, you can go anywhere from a max Lexile level, so very challenging vocabulary, down to perhaps like maybe a 3rd or 4th grade level. It's the same reading, just the vocabulary changes, but the kids are still getting the same concept or idea. And so we've done that quite a bit, where we've pushed out different level readings to different groups. So we group our kids all the time based on our MAP scores and our Lexiles, and those groups change, and they're very flexible already. And then we push out different types of readings to them and challenge them that way.
So it's working all right now, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering, will it work as well if you change the structure a little bit?
Yeah, we'll still use those flexible groupings, and we'll still be able to push out the different kinds of level readings to the kids. We'll be able to, those groups can change and vary as we get new data. You know, we can have more homogeneous groupings in the class if we want, or we can have heterogeneous groupings in the class. We're able to do both things.
I don't mean to simplify this, but isn't this our practice at our elementaries?
Yes.
That in, 3rd grade and 4th grade, we have students that are at very different spectrums. A 3rd grader, we might have a 3rd grader that's at 1st grade, 2nd grade reading level, and a 3rd grader that's pushing at the top of 4th, maybe early 5th. And our teachers are making that adjustment with the students and putting the proper materials in those students' hands. And we can do that, especially with the technology we have in Google Classroom.
And this change will give more of a balance to the teacher-student ratio. We can conference more, it's more manageable for us to talk to 18 students versus 32 in the same amount of time due to our block schedule.
So I'm curious about the difference between middle school and an elementary school child and how they see each other and teach each other. One of the things that was told to us back a while ago with respect to the Chromebooks was that it would be nice for the kids in the lower grades because they had book carts and they were embarrassed if they pulled a shelf, book off the shelf, that was well below the rest of the class's capability, right? And the computer was nice because then they didn't have to do that in front of their peers. But you're telling me, I think, that the kids are teaching each other, the puzzle thing and all that analogy. So has it changed because of the development over time and the age of the kids? or what?
I don't know if it's changed, but it's made it easier, I think.
And I know,
Go ahead.
and I think they start to learn themselves as a learner a little bit more so than
Okay,
from the teacher. They can see what can I do, what can I not do through their own use of the Chromebook, their own use of the technology and the programs we push out.
ultimately, I just want to make sure that we still have an investment that works in the program.
Oh, yeah,
How
we're
do you
using it.
structure it, right?
We're using it,
So
yeah.
let me ask one more question, please. Okay, or maybe it's a suggestion, or I don't know, it's a question to start with, but Vicki and whoever else can handle this kind of stuff, can you come back to us with what maybe is a bell curve, or maybe it's bimodal, I don't know, but can you show me achievement of performance over time per grade level per year so that I can look at what has been historically the case? You know, where are the outliers, you know, the kids that are really having a struggle, and where are the ones that are super advanced? You know, that will now, some of them be folded back in, you know, to the core of the thing. You know, can we, and I mean, I love graphs because I can get in a moment, I can see where we were, where we are, and where we're going. It's predictive, right? You know, so can somebody put together, you know, it'd be fairly simple, I think, if you have the data. The question would be whether the measurement is the same for each grade level, you know, and also, of course, across years. I know it's not the same across the years, right?
Right.
We keep changing.
In our meeting this month before April, you and I usually meet at least once or twice. Can we talk about the kind of data that you want to see?
Sure.
You and I and Dr. Huber and Amy Luckner can sit down and, because I think I know what you're asking for, but we have a lot of different measurements.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about.
I'd like to talk about,
Right.
kind of break down what it is you want to see.
Right.
Yeah, we do.
And it might be a good idea for you to go toward also the elementary. I mean, they work in that specific group of how they're planning to move towards. So it's not something new per se.
Yeah.
It's just what it is just technically eliminating that advanced section so that they are just mixed. But it's already happening.
Yeah, but that's the middle school, you said, it was the elementary.
Elementary is already doing exactly what
Oh, is
the
that
middle
right?
school is asking
Okay.
to do.
Right. So,
Thanks.
yeah, and I want to thank you, I mean, for taking a look at something that isn't working for us right now. We can tell that by how our flow is going up into the high school, and middle school, and who is in honors and who isn't mingling into that. So thank you for taking a look at something and coming up with a solution that we can try and make this better for our students.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone.
Next, we have materials adoption proposal for AP biology. This is an information.
I'm back. Okay, so because the night is long, well, we're going, no, hold on. We have 3 materials to bring before you, so we're gonna do this very quickly, where the material is gonna be introduced to you, but you have all the paperwork, you have the whole slide presentation. The only thing we're gonna be having up on the screen is the actual cost. So you'll be given a brief description of each book, and then we'll go over the cost, and then we'll go on to the next one. And then, of course, if you have questions. Okay.
I am so excited. I'm Angie Johnson. This is my 6th year teaching AP Bio at high school. And we're are in line to get our next edition of the book. And so we picked the Campbell Biology. This is the most beautiful book in the whole world. I call it the Beyonce of all books because it's perfect and it's gorgeous. What's fantastic about this particular book for our AP students is the fact that there's so much technology offered. This book, as you'll see, weighs a ton, and the kids will not carry it back and forth. So what's nice is all of our kids can have a license for their Chromebooks, and I can push out assignments, reading assignments. I can actually keep track of how much they're reading. I can push out practice problems. I can push out quiz practice, AP exam tests, practice questions. We can have a dialogue back and forth about their reading. I can work with them in Spanish with the technology. There are little videos that are built in. There's mini labs built in. It's the most beautiful thing in the whole world. And it's to be able to offer this to our students is pretty remarkable.
Debbie Pearson, who's
Yes. It's gorgeous. This is really, there are probably about 4 textbooks that are available for us to choose from, according to the College Board. And this is the most popular one in the country that's used. And we've used, I think this is the 3rd time the district has purchased this particular author.
And they keep upgrading their.
Oh, and it's,
they upgrade
everything's
their,
better.
what they do through the computer.
Yes, everything is fantastic. If you see some of the graphics in here, it's just amazing. And then we get all kinds of test booklets, and I get the test maker. We're offering our kids something fabulous, you know, at the school, and especially with the Chromebooks. So now they don't have to haul that thing back and forth because they won't do it. And this way everything's electronic. And I'm so excited. Our kids this year are really jealous because when that got delivered and I opened the box, they just went nuts. They were like, oh, we don't get that book.
Gary, here's your discussion with the Chromebooks.
Mm-hmm.
That Chromebook thing with Pearson and with others, but Pearson does a really good job of creating a very dynamic kind of interactive sort of presentation for these things. So
And I will get training on that too. It comes with the package. And then I'll get support for like 6 years. You know, any support I need, the company's right there for me. I'm just so excited.
we have a contract for this, a certain length of contract.
I believe it's 6 years.
So-
6 years, I think.
Yeah, so the cost proposal reflects this shift, and you've seen this before with other materials we've brought before you. So the proposal, this first line here, the $167.47, that's for each. It's a digital license along with a hard copy. So there's going to be a set of 40 books in the classroom. In addition, though, then there'll be an additional 70 just digital licenses. So up to 110 students. And you've been
I'm
averaging.
gonna actually have more than that next year. So.
Okay.
Something else that's beautiful, I just thought of along with those licenses is, like, if I have the classroom set, if I often have 504 students or IEP students that take AP, and we encourage that. Sometimes they do need a hard copy of the book as part of their accommodations. And so with having a classroom set, I can actually check one of those books out to a student that needs that accommodation.
You historically needed that many books for a classroom set, or is that?
We need 28. It was the package deal that if you did think it was a better price, if we got 40 and just 28.
Oh, okay.
We typically have 28. But we got a better deal with this.
Is this also your AP? Is it becoming updated? I know what is every 10 years?
Every 10, this is my year. Yeah,
This year.
it's my turn.
We have all the AP courses now on a rotation cycle, so that, because by per college board, the AP courses have to be updated every 10 years, and the materials have to be selected from a pre-approved list from College Board. So as Angie described, the Campbell biology is probably the most widely used, and has performed really, really well here in Dekalb.
I'm in love with it. I just love this book.
How long does it take to get through this book?
We cannot. It's 56 chapters and we can't get through it.
Of course.
Our AP students I have to do projects like over winter break to get through an additional group of chapters, but I'm able to get through, I think, about 30 chapters.
That's a lot.
We don't have enough time.
It's like 3 years or 5 years. 20
Exactly,
years.
and it's supposed to be comparable to like freshman year in biology in a college.
Sure.
I have a biology degree. That's not freshman year. This would be the equivalent of a couple of years of college.
Yeah.
The book is gorgeous.
Go ahead.
This book is going to be replaced in 10 years.
Mhm.
And you have some contracts for 6 years.
Yeah.
And
Thank you. Yes.
those are original new contracts with, as time goes on, that deal with a lot of the supporting material the person is going to be providing. What happens in years 7 through 10?
Then we go back.
Do they continue to support?
Yes.
Yeah. So the way that the digital world in terms of textbooks is now operating, so we'll hit that, actually it'll be year 5. We'll go back to Pearson, and because we'll have that contract with the digital textbook and with the platform. And then at that point, by then textbooks companies, what they do is they've got like long range plans for some platforms. For example, there's some other digital materials that we're phasing out at the high school because they've reached their longevity. When we hit end of year 5, ending into year 6 with this platform, we'll go back to Pearson and say, all right, how long are you going to support this existing platform, but the company like Pearson, they tend to update it on a pretty regular basis. And then after the 6 years, then we would renegotiate with them in terms of making sure that our platform is up to date.
You said you had 110 students coming this year, right? So is that why the 70 with 40? How do you?
Well, we were just estimating, I actually have over 120 signed up for next year. So
That's new, because when we did these numbers,
we did these
before
numbers,
Christmas,
we just got our numbers
we
in.
looked at historically the enrollment and then increased it by 10.
Yeah.
So
And what's the distribution of freshmen through seniors?
It's just juniors and seniors.
Juniors and seniors.
It's open enrollment for AP courses, so anyone can sign up for that. So anybody that's gone through freshman and sophomore year science is allowed to take that. And then I have, like I said, 504 students, IEP students. I have 30% minority, or over 30% minority taking these.
It's really good.
I'm so excited. I love this class so much.
Well, it shows in the number of kids that are
We
signing
should
up.
always invite to come visit.
Is this scored within the Pearson system electronically and all of the student grades and things effectively like a grade book?
I think I could do
In your
that.
area, or is it within
Um,
our area?
No, I actually use the test bank and I make the tests. So I make sure that they are, you can manipulate the questions and everything. And I actually go in and make the tests more using vocabulary. Sometimes I'll use a little bit different vocabulary or use a different example. So I can actually go in and I can alter the tests to fit my students, and then I do the grading. There is a grade book thing available with them, but we have Skyward, so I don't want to use anything else.
It stays in Skyward.
Yeah, I like using Skyward.
We have a consensus that we bring this back.
Yeah.
Victoria, but I will have to update this proposal because hearing
Reflect
tonight that
110 students.
I'll have to add another 10 to the cost proposal, and I'll send you that update.
Okay, great.
All right,
Thank you.
Thanks.
we're a long way from home.
Yep, we are. Continuous adoption proposal for AP European history. Oh, I'm sorry, this is an informational.
So Ally Belser could not be here tonight. She is out of town. So she asked me to introduce the book that she has selected for AP European History, Western Civilization. I'll go ahead and just start. This one is not nearly as heavy as the biology one, nor as pretty or as exciting, unless you're a history buff. This text was selected actually for a number of reasons. It's well-developed text and layout makes the information much more accessible than the text that they're using at present. And just like with AP Bio, the text that's being used right now is out of date. It was published in 2007. So that's why we had to make a selection of a new text per College Board for AP European History. The other reason why she actually had 3 texts she was looking at. This was around Thanksgiving, Christmas, and she brought the samples to her AP Euro class to get their critique, because AP Euro is a very dense, heavy content, factual information, a lot of disseminating information. And one of the things that her students reported to her is because of the way the layout of the book, the way it zeroes in on the important points that are also reflected in the AP Euro test, this text really kind of went to the front. It also, like the AP Bio, is also widely used by other school districts that offer this course to their students. Another part is it does have a digital platform called MindTrap. This is a different company, Cengage, but on that digital platform that they call MindTrap, that's where the annotated notes within the digital text are available, additional writing and reading supports as the students are working through the text, because again, this is a very dense, content-heavy course, and so the students through their through the digital side are really supported in their reading of the material, but also the interactive writing piece. And then also embedded in it are quite a few study tools, because again, in an AP course, the end goal, of course, is to be prepared for the campus. So that is that text. As you can see, this is the cost breakdown. Is there going to jump on this enrollment as well, James?
For
AP Euro, we have it at 70.
You're good.
Okay.
It's tight, but you're good.
All right. And each publisher kind of gives you different breaks in terms of getting you to buy their materials. So for this one, and this particular publisher also bundles the digital platform with the text, which means we can't just buy like a classroom set and then have everything digital. It actually doesn't cost out that way. So we actually, with Cengage, and we had to do this last year with AP Gov, it's actually bundled together the hard copy along with the 6-year access to the digital side. So that first bundle of 65, you can see it's $140 each for about $9,100. But then they gave us a bundle of an additional 5 because we really needed 70. And they gave that to us for free. So the total, you can see the total amount is at a little over $10,000. Questions? Good for the next one?
So do we have a consensus to bring back the AP European history?
Absolutely.
Okay, next we have the materials adoption for proposal for pre-calculus, and this is an information line.
And I do want to mention, I want to apologize that we had to come to you tonight with 3 material proposals. The game plan was actually to have pre-calculus come to you last month, but due to the bad weather we had in January, Curriculum Council had to be canceled, and that automatically bunched everything up. So my apologies. This process for the pre-calculus looks very different than the other 2, because with AP, you start with a list. This is what the College Board approves. You look at what's going to be most successful for your program and your students, and you select the materials. In the math department, as you may remember, with algebra, geometry, and algebra 2, we started with a rubric to guarantee that the materials were aligned with Common Core. When you get to pre-calculus, however, pre-calculus does not fall under that spectrum or that umbrella. There is no Common Core standards for pre-calculus. It stops at algebra 2. But the math department desperately needed updated materials because their book also was a 2007, 2008 edition. Didn't have any digital components to it, had no way to differentiate, had no way to really support their students. In addition, because pre-calculus follows right after algebra 2, but also sets up the bridge for calculus, changes in algebra 2 had taken place because of alignment to Common Core. The existing text no longer fit and wasn't really creating that really solid bridge. So what we did is we brought the math team together, and they actually first started by looking at algebra 2 and looking at the changes and shifts that had happened as a result of aligning to Common Core. And then they looked at calculus and those must-have skills that the students needed to have to be successful in calculus. And then with that, they took a critical eye and looked at 4 different materials for pre-calculus in terms of what would make the most sense in terms of really creating a cohesive bridge between those 2 math courses. And they literally, by doing that, created a rubric so that there was a must-have connection between the newly aligned algebra 2 and calculus, as well as really zeroing in on those skills that were lacking and content that was lacking in the old book. So this new book, it's published by Glencoe McGraw-Hill. It's called Precalculus. It has everything that a digital edition you would want it to have. We're proposing, obviously, some classroom sets, but in addition, that digital platform will allow them, the students will have a digital copy on their Chromebook. They'll be able to differentiate. There's interactive videos as well as interactive homework helps. There is interactive vocabulary and study helps. And then also embedded in there is, if you might remember with Algebra 2, when we adopted that, we added Mac Excel, which was an additional software platform that really helped teachers zero in and differentiate the skills for their students. McGraw-Hill has a different platform, same principle, called Alex. And so with this book will come that additional layer that will really allow the pre-calculus teachers to really differentiate how they're parsing out the course. So in terms of the cost, And again, with McGraw-Hill, they give you some things for free and then the rest you have to pay. And adding in the Alex bundle did up the cost of the book, but we also knew how much Math Excel had helped in Algebra 2. So what McGraw-Hill has done for us, you can see that that with the cost, you have 60 of the actual student editions with the digital platform. And then we have an additional just e-student of 120, where it's just the digital platform. But the way in which we're able to really afford the ALEC platform, because we've seen it be the Math Excel so successful with Algebra 2, is that they're giving us a break in terms of some of the ALEC bundle and literally letting us have a whole section of it for free. So about 90 of that e-student bundle with the ALEC, they're going to give us for free. So we'll be able to save quite a bit of money going into the bottom amount, which will be about a little over $16,000.
Questions? Do we have a consensus then to bring this back at your next meeting? Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. Next, we have DeKalb 428 Safety Security Overview, and this is an informational item. Tammy?
After the last board meeting, we were asked to put together a presentation to give an overview of our safety, some of our safety and security protocols that we have been doing for quite some time. So to start out, I wanted to introduce some people that are not actually standing up in here with us, but are definitely part of our team. And those include Connie Rollman, our principal at Founders, Brooke Condon, our principal at Brooks Elementary, Aaron Lockhart, our detective and SRO at DeKalb High School, and then myself and Officer Jaquez, our SRO at the middle and elementary schools. So back in 2012, the Sandy Hook shooting took place, December of 12, and that is truly what changed how school districts, or at least DeKalb specifically, really took a hard look at our protocols on lockdowns and what we did. So in spring of 2013, JJ came to me and said, we need to take a hard look at our protocols and make a decision in regards to possible changes. We were in a traditional lockdown mode before 2013, which basically meant an emergency would happen at a shooter situation, and we would have our students and staff lock down and hide in the corner and turn off the lights and wait for police assistance. When we were approached, when JJ brought this to me in March, I was very apprehensive. I was not sure about the idea of really running away, and some of the ideas that he had that were out in the media and in the first responders mode, and not so much in the school district. So JJ, Aaron, Connie, and I went to a training in Wisconsin, and we became what is called an ALICE certified trainer, and we're going to be going into what ALICE stands for shortly. But we became certified trainers, and it wasn't long into the training, Connie and I really looked at this and said, boy, we really changed how we looked at how lockdown should take place and how active shooter situations need to take place to keep our staff and students safe. In August, we brought it to the board, and we adopted the new ALICE protocol, and then at that time, we communicated it to all of our families, our students, and our staff. And that first year of 13-14, we put out about 15 or more training sessions in various times and locations, just so that we could get all of our staff trained on the ALICE protocol. Because it was definitely a change in mindset. We attended any building staff meetings that we were requested to attend, so we could have some small group discussions with staff members at that point, before any drills or anything was put out to the students. And then in 2014, we made the decision we needed another member on our team for a variety of reasons, and Brooke Condon became certified and joined our ALICE team. And then 16, 17, we all became recertified. We had to go through a recertification process.
Okay, ALICE is an acronym. It's not necessarily in the order of ALICE. It sounds good. First is the alert. That is actually the first action you do, is to notify that there's a danger. Put out that there's a shooter or knife, someone wielding a knife, whatever that is. Put it out to as many people as you can, as fast as you can. L, which may not be the next step, but would be lockdown. It's not the traditional lockdown that we were doing before. This is locking down plus barricading the door, plus doing things to make it harder for a person to get into that classroom. Informed, that's to keep the information flowing. So we, as we'll mention later in the presentation, our voice over IP phones can help us do that. Keep the other people in the building, first responders, everything else informed on what's going on real time. Counter says create noise, movement, distance, just makes yourself a harder target. Counter is not necessarily fighting back. It could include that, but it's when you have no other choice, you have to do something because the person's about to kill you. And then evacuate, probably the best option for most of our students is that when it's safe to get yourself out of the situation. Traditionally, it's to leave the building, go to a rally point that we've established, and all the schools have been trained on how to go from the school to the rally point to the evacuation point. That's part of the training we're doing. But that's what ALICE stands for. Alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So there's the communication part of it, and that is the alert people to let people know. How do we do that?
We're going to get to that.
Oh, you're going to go through all these various points?
We're not going to get that in depth in it. There's two different ways. Well, one, you can just shout it. If someone comes in here, we're going to shout that it's going on. It's getting someone's attention. We have the radios that the staff, some of the staff members carry, the star 111 on the voice over IP phones announces it makes all the phones in the building a intercom. You have the intercom if the office is able to do that. Whatever way you can.
Yeah. And I think one of the major changes from what we used to do to what we do now is with alert. A traditional protocol was that the announcement was always made from the office. And now we have it where we have given permission to staff and students, whoever can make an announcement, make it. Because the office staff may not be able to make an announcement and let the staff know or students know. If they may not know, they may be in a crisis situation, unable to.
City of taught us there's possibility to take out the office first. That's what happened. So then they wouldn't be able to make it. ALICE training, ALICE is everywhere. 50 states, 1 million individuals have been trained, over 4,000 police departments, over 4,000 K-12 schools, 1,300 healthcare facilities, colleges, higher education, 950, 355 businesses. This is nationwide. 760 government agencies, which is significant because Homeland Security uses something similar to ALICE, run, hide, fight. That's what they put out there. So even government agencies are saying, okay, this is what the feds want. We want ALICE instead. 480 houses of worship, and then 90 individuals and families have done independently of wherever they work. Things like that.
So some facts just relating to our district. We adopted ALICE in August of 13, as I mentioned. We were the first school district in DeKalb County to adopt ALICE protocols. And we have 5 trainers, as I've already gone through. There have been 30 ALICE training sessions in DeKalb School District for staff members in 5 years. So there have been many opportunities for staff to attend, and in that first year, we made sure everyone was trained before we finished that first year. And now as new employees are joining the ranks, we put that training out. This year, we have offered 4 different sessions just since August 15th approximately, at various times of the day, various days of the week, so that staff can attend, whether they've never attended or they just want a refresher. Anyone is always welcome. Over 80 drills have been completed, 80 ALICE drills across all of our schools in just 5 years. And that includes surprise drills. Surprise drills, what those are where the ALICE team, which is the 5 individuals I've already mentioned, as well as support from some of our facility operations team, we go in and we do a drill at a school, and the staff and administration are not even aware we're coming. We pick out doors, we come in different locations, we give a specific note to the person who's making the announcement that makes it very clear to staff and students that this is a drill, this is only a drill, it is not an actual emergency. But then goes into describing the intruder, where they are at, what do they look like, so that staff can practice making those immediate decisions of do I evacuate or do I lock down, or what do I do? So we do surprise drills by the Alice team at every single building at least once a year. In addition, we've been asked by Sycamore, West Aurora, the DeKalb County ROE Safety and Security Committee, as well as IMSA, to come and speak in regards to the Alice information. We've had team members at each of these locations talking about why DeKalb has chosen to go with Alice and why we as individuals, as certified trainers, recommend this as a protocol that school districts or other organizations adopt.
The Alice team has trained other groups as well through requests either through the school district or someone go through the police department. St. Mary's, Camelot, Ombudsman are the educational facilities. Safe Passage, we just went to their, we trained them and also went to their site to do security assessment of it. We've gone to the university and spoke to NIU student teachers. And then you see the other places there, including 2 churches that we just did last 3-4 months. Ongoing efforts, the annual training, we have 4 training sessions per year. Tammy mentioned that. They're at different times. We'll have them like during institute days, like during the institute period. We'll have them after hours, so that's after the second shift custodians or second shift food service people can attend. The staff meetings we've offered to all the administrators. Happy to come to your staff meeting, explain everything. We've also, at our trainings, we tell them we can't go to every classroom, but if a teacher has a specific question, they ask one of the Alice members and we can go to the classroom and kind of walk them through what would be a good idea to do. Ongoing drills, Tammy went through this pretty well, but State Board of Education requires 1 drill. We do 2. One is the administration does it. Their baby, if they want to invite us to them, we'll be happy to come and watch. And the other is the surprise drill that Tammy explained before. And that's sometimes kind of fun.
And I should also note, with the surprise drills, we always take time after the drill is over to debrief. Our team members get together with the building administration and debrief of what we observed during the drill, because we're strategically located in different parts of the building. So we can come back and say, you know, we saw this happening and this didn't happen, and these might be some points that you might want to talk about at your next staff meeting. So we make sure and debrief so that we can learn from each of these drills and use that as an ongoing training opportunity. The other things we have is we have a safety task force that meets 4 times a year, and that's just between the months of September and May, just the school year. I'm the chairperson, but there are individuals from the district union reps, administration, board members at this time. Carrie Malat has attended the majority of the safety task force meetings and been an active member, as well as first responders from the community, and also just general community members are invited to attend. We discuss protocols, different proposals, equipment purchases, and other safety and security concerns that might come up. Everyone is welcome to contribute a variety of topics to the agendas. We also talk about safety and security at leadership. It's always a topic at the very first leadership meeting of the year to talk about any potential changes that have happened to our protocols over the summer, because that's usually times that we really spend tweaking them if we need to, even though we do it throughout the year also. But we do talk about them randomly as needed at our leadership meetings. And then we also have worked with and worked cooperatively with the police department and reached out to them to allow, or ask them actually to do trainings in our schools so that they come once a year to do a rapid deployment training, and we open up, we've had the high school in Clinton Rosette specifically that they have come into with the county, the state, or I'm sorry, the county, NIU, and the city. And they have come in and done and conducted actual rapid deployment training for an entire week in our district and schools so that they could train and get familiar with our own floor plans and not just being JJ and Aaron that are in our buildings all the time. There are many members that attend. We also open it up throughout the school year for them to use Cheeseboro Elementary as another place to train. They've done K-9 training there, rapid deployment active shooter training at Cheeseboro Elementary, and do that probably every few months. They reach out and say, hey, can we get in there again? And we say, sure.
Students present, students not present?
Students not present. The rapid deployment happens in the summer for a week, and the Cheeseboro, obviously, we don't have students over.
So some of these exercises that you do there are students present or never.
All of our drills, students are present.
Right.
All of our drills. Those 80 drills I talked about over the last 5 years across our building, students have been present at all 80 drills.
The rapid deployment training includes Portland officers if there's available, and also the, she had mentioned the county people. So that does allow us to work with people that would be showing up to definitely Portland and Malta, but also as NIU demonstrated. NIU was there first, city was there second, county was there next, Sycamore was there after that. So we always work together in those rapid deployment trainings, and with Tammy opening up the building so that we can do that, it's definitely benefit to all departments.
Some of the things we've talked about at Safety Task Force, which I know, Carrie could attest to this, we have put in secure entrances at all of our buildings in the last 6 years, I believe it's been. All of our buildings have had construction projects approved that have main entrances that have cameras and buzzer systems available. And even though we're talking about ELDC earlier, they have a secure entrance. It's just not as secure as some of our other buildings, which is why we're looking to improve that. We have voice over IP phones at all buildings. Little John is the last one to get on board this school year, and theirs will become live for the start of next school year. All the wiring's been done. We just need to get the phones themselves in place. Intercom and speaker upgrades happen all the time. If we have an issue, we identify in a building, we get in there with our maintenance staff, and they have the ability to upgrade any systems we need to there. As well as we've purchased a Raptor visitor management system, which requires all building visitors to be to present their state ID and be screened through the registered sex offender list. And we don't also have the option with that to do our own customized alerts. So if we have an individual that has, as an example, let's say there's a parent that there's a restraining order against a parent and they cannot be around their child. That can be entered into the system. So if their driver's license is put through Raptor, there's actually an alert that will pop up and alert the staff and administration in regards to the restriction of that parent. And then the last is the Crisis Go app, which is an app that we are currently using in regard to having quick access to protocols and plans and other contact.
More security improvements, the cloud lock, cloud access security broker. Ben would be a much better person to talk this issue. But really quickly, that and along with security editor, everything that goes through the Chromebooks, everything that goes through the network goes through one of those two security systems, and it flags the items. The principals will get a flag alert. There's been times where they communicate with Aaron and I saying, hey, we got a flag about this student making suicidal comments, this student making a threat. The picture was sent across and it was inappropriate, and that flag goes on. So those two things guard our security, our network security, to make it a lot more safe. Cameras, we're constantly updating cameras, the positions within reason, maybe up, down, right, left. If necessary, we'll actually move the camera itself, and then also making sure that they're online and operating for license forms. They should be working. Radios, we went digital when the federal government told us we had to go digital, but then also it's a much better radio. It communicates further, radios last longer, and it's better quality. Also, it then allowed districts to have channels that can communicate with the police department. The police department in their dispatch center has this particular radio that they can turn on and listen to our crisis channel, and then they can communicate back and forth. So it's not just between Aaron, we're not using Aaron and I as a relay, they can actually go direct. Cloud locks, or excuse me, cloud locks. Door locks, we had a few schools that were the old school locks. The teachers would have to go outside of their classroom, lock the door, and go back in to lock it and secure it. All those locks have been changed, so all of our doors are compliant with the protocol.
On a side note, we don't just do intruder drills. We're talking a lot about intruder drills today, but ISB does require all of these safety drills that are listed, and our principals do comply with this every year at a minimum. There's 3 evacuations or fire drills that are done. One of them has to be observed by the fire department to receive their input and feedback during the drill. 1 severe weather, a bus evacuation, and then again, only 1 required intruder drill, but we do 2. And then every 3 years, we do a full evacuation where we fully evacuate a building once every 3 years to the Sports and Rec Center. The Alice team put together the reunification plan several years ago and how that would look and who would participate and what are the jobs. We have gone through, all of our buildings have been through a full evacuation at least once. Some of them are now on their second round as we get into a 3-year cycle. And then some other drills that our district requires that are not required by ISB are we do the one surprise intruder drill, we do an allergic reaction or an EpiPen drill, and then we also do a bomb threat through the phone system. We call in a bomb threat so that they can practice how would they react should a phone call come through the main office.
Okay, since we're primarily talking about the intruder and that type of safety, some final thoughts. The United States Secret Service, after Columbine, was tasked to try to profile a school shooter. They were not able to do that. There wasn't an accurate profile for the mass shooter, but some of the things they did come up with, 73% of the mass shooters had no criminal record. No real screen to try to catch them. And then the one other constant is 81% of the mass shootings, somebody outside the shooter knew that the shooter was going to conduct this mass. So that really does harp on the fact that we can't live in a vacuum. That if people know something, they have to say something. Theodore Roosevelt said it the best. In any moment of decision, the best thing is to do the right thing. The next thing is the wrong thing. The worst thing you do is nothing. Analysis by paralysis will kill you. And then if you see something, say something. One of the things, I listened to the comments last board meeting that the student said that he was a sycamore student that roamed through the building for hours. The first thing that's popping in my head as I'm listening to videotape is, who did she tell? If she knew that there was another student, if somebody here knew that somebody was going to do something in this room, stay silent and then complain that we didn't do anything afterward doesn't help us. It has to be done from within, and we have to get that culture going. And I think we have. Everything we're doing is getting the culture to make the district more and more safe every day.
I have a question. Sorry. Question. Last night I was at a meeting at the high school, and I was coming out, fun, everybody was having a great time, everybody was working out. There were various events going on. At the main door to the gyms, main door, eastern door to the gyms, kids were letting other kids in. They were coming in from the parking lot. It was cool, windy. They were running from the parking lot into the gym. Other kids were letting them in. 2 kids came up to the door to the gym, the exit doors to the gym, the brown exit doors to the gym, beat on the doors. Somebody opened it up. Doesn't seem like that's, I mean, for all the fact that we have lockdowns, you have to go through the front, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of running around, and understandable.
This is during the school day?
After. This was after hours. So it seems to me that informal aspect, or that informal, hey, somebody's beating on the door, come run and open up the door, that doesn't seem very secure. And I'm not sure how you'd address it.
Right. Can I address this? Part of the challenge we have as a school is we're a community center.
I understand. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying we have lockdown doors and you have lockdown protocols.
And I don't know that our kids would do the same thing during the school day unless they look through the door and they know that it's, one of their buddies and they open the door for one of their friends. I could see kids doing that. James, you can maybe speak to this better than I. I don't know if students would just open the door for strangers.
Can I mention something on that? During the school day, Connie had a great story from a situation when she was at Malta.
So, being on the Alice team, I always went around to all the classrooms and talked to the kids about the fact that you don't let somebody in the door, they have to open the office. I said, it doesn't matter if it's your friend's mom, my friend's dad, your parent, a teacher, it doesn't matter. One day I went outside to deal with a situation on the playground, forgot my keys. I have it, went to the door, knocked, The kindergartner stood there, big eyes up to me and just shook his head no. So I had to walk all the way around the building. When I got in with comments, and of course he was nervous, and I said, no, you did the right thing. Even though you knew who I was, you had been told, don't let anybody in knock on the doors. So I think it starts with, at that very young age, as staff members, of training the kids and talking to them and making them understand it doesn't matter who that person is knocking on that door. They have to go through the main office.
Right.
And after hours, we acknowledge, we open up our doors to the basketball games, to all the events, the fine arts events. We, at that point, there is a level that we cannot control that type of access. What we strive to do is during the school day, when the children are our responsibility 110%, that we have the proper doors locked and secured and protocols in place for how to get into our buildings and how to respond if there was an emergency situation.
Well, some of those would probably be fire exit doors, right? I mean, they would be ones that you can't lock up. Certain ones, I would imagine.
Well, all
those
of our
ground doors that are open to the kids.
They always open
It's
out.
a door that's open, right, James? I mean, I've gone after hours many times. There's only that one door.
The front doors, and the doors are locked, but I mean, you are right. I mean, the especially that athletic wing is very heavily used after school.
Sure.
So, and you have kids coming and going because your practice is starting through, but they are locked. We do have security that is roaming that area.
Yeah.
However, any kid in athletic uniform kind of fits in at that point.
Yeah.
Especially when we get into spring sports,
Yeah.
we have, baseball, softball, track, boys and girls track, or all outside tennis coming in and out. And, kids see their peers, they're gonna open the doors and let each other in.
In this case, they couldn't see it. But I understand that there's a certain amount of informality that we have to work around. I mean, any kind of safety procedures have to work around a certain amount of real life instances.
But during the day, all doors to our buildings are locked from the outs. All exterior doors are locked from the start of the school day till the end of the school day. The only way in is to get logged in through the front door or have a swipe card as an employee.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's a big job. Appreciate it.
Next, we have the non-business consent agenda. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the non-business consent agenda items A through F.
We'll wait before.
Yeah, let's get a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Go ahead, Beth.
I know that item C is resolution of authorizing dismissal of certain support personnel, reduction of force. This is classified staff, so I take part of it as the health assistants that are here today. And, I know that this is something that we've talked about it. But I, as a board member, just want to, thank, I was an assistant too in the district for some time, and I just want to thank all the health assistants. And I know that this isn't something that is easy for a district to do. I understand that it, potentially, puts people in a situation that you don't want to be in. But I also want to thank everyone. I know the work that you do, and I know how crucial your work is. Every single one of you plays an important role in kids' lives, so thank you. And I'm sorry.
Roll call, please.
Jeff Alwyn,
Yes.
Carrie Malette,
Yes.
Victoria Laporte,
Yes.
Valerie Pendleton Hernandez,
Yes.
Howard Song.
Yes.
Next, we have the business consent agenda. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the business consent agenda items A through D.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Carrie Malette,
Yes.
Victoria Laporte,
Yes.
Valerie Pendleton Hernandez,
Yes.
Howard Song,
Yes.
Jeff Alwyn.
Yes.
Next is the business and finance and intergovernmental agreement and easement agreement between DeKalb Community Unit School District 428 and DeKalb Park District. And this is an action item that the Board of Education approve the intergovernmental agreement and an easement agreement between DeKalb Community Unit School District 428 and DeKalb Park District, whereby the parties will exchange land which administration believes best serves the interest of their respective constituents.
Question?
Do we have a motion?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Discussion is, we've talked, this is, Tammy, we've talked about this is ending up being revenue negative, regular revenue neutral. Basically, that's what we're voting on, correct? The things
That
we've
is
discussed.
correct.
Hasn't
There's,
changed.
due to all the exchange of expenses that are happening through this process, there's no actually monies exchanging.
Great, thank you very much for clarifying.
Could you just state who's getting what as like
A review from the last.
a brief review?
Sure. A brief review is, we own the baseball, softball fields on Bar Boulevard that are at Huntley Middle School. Park District is going to own them after the swap is complete. And the property surrounding Brooks Elementary on the west side and the south side, that is the Brooks Park District Park, currently owned by the Park District and will now be owned by DeKalb School District once this is approved by our board and then the Park District Board on Thursday night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, roll call.
Valerie Finley Hernandez.
Yes.
Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht.
Yes,
Karen Black.
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes.
and thanks to both of you guys. Thank you, Tammy, and thank you so much, Jamie, for making that happen.
Next, we have the Carrie Kreshek Memorial Scholarship. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the Carrie Kreshek Memorial Scholarship document. A motion,
I'll move.
Second.
discussion?
Could we have a summary again? Can I ask Cindy for a summary again?
Yeah, sure. We had Gordon Kreshek, who is the father of Carrie. Carrie passed away, and annually he gives a scholarship for a student athlete, female student athlete at the high school. And on top of that, he also gives additional funds to put into a reserve, and he would like to, as he's getting older, secure those funds to make sure they're used appropriately in the future, and he would like to continue to put money in those reserves. So this just spells out how we would utilize those funds in the future.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht.
Yes,
Karen Black.
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes.
Valerie Finley Hernandez.
Yes. Next is bid results for Founder's parking lot expansion, and this is an action item. That the Board of Education approve the Founder's parking lot expansion base bid for the expansion in the amount of $161,991 to Kern Contracting from DeKalb, Illinois, contingent upon the approval from the City of Dekalb and acceptance by district administration of any project changes required by the City of DeKalb that are within the contingency amount of $16,199. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
second discussion.
Discussion?
I'd like to summarize this as far as what we're doing, briefly, what we're doing and where we're doing it
Sure.
at the school.
At Founders Elementary, in the last couple of years, we have added additional programs which have added additional staff and visitors because of the increase in the number of support and IEP meetings that happen in that building. Because of that, we don't have enough parking spaces for the average amount of staff members that are in that building at any given time, as well as enough spaces for visitors. So this lot would actually run parallel to the bus lane in the front of the building, and it would connect our own property, our own entrances and exits, so that we're not adding additional entrances or exits to city streets. It would give us approximately 32 more parking spaces in the front of our building, and would be paid for out of operations and maintenance through this year and the next fiscal budget year.
And 175 was the best bid out of,
161,991 was the best bid received out of, we actually, 6 came in, 2 were rejected because they did not meet the bid specifications, so 4 qualified bids.
great, thank you.
Any other questions?
And
I got a
Kern is
question.
local.
Correct.
Yeah, current local. When we put the bus line in, I know city did engineering and we had to have it redone because the architect, ISB, yeah. It wasn't up to snuff, for the state standards, right? So there's no issue there, is there, with this parking lot? Is all that architectural design?
This has been designed by our architect as well as our engineers. We actually, with the bus lot, the city was involved in the design initially, and then we came forward as a school district and felt that it should be a thicker surface because it was going to have buses, and a bus is way more than an average car. This one is a parking lot, so it's been designed for a standard parking lot thickness. It's going in front of the city. We have our first meeting. They have a lot of our paperwork already, and I've reviewed it and given us some already recommended changes that were incorporated into the bid. We're going in front of the city planning committee tomorrow night, myself and the engineer, and then we'll be in front of the city council if all goes well to get that approved by the city and find out if there's any other recommended changes, which is why this approval is contingent upon anything that they are recommending, that we accept their changes up to the contingency amount.
Yeah, what about that contingency? Yeah, okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Roll call, please.
Jeff Albertine,
Yes.
Terry Millet,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Tanya Hernandez.
Yes.
Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Next, we have budget proposal, Facility Operations Department. This is an action item that the Board of Education consider the expansion of the operations and maintenance budget for 2018-2019 in the amount of $385,000. Discussion?
What do we get for it, Tammy?
Attached to the board rec at the last meeting and then also at this meeting was a list of exactly what we would be looking for that additional funds for. There are several projects that we need to move forward with. The largest one on the list that you'll see is the auditorium improvements at Huntley Middle School. NIU is vacating their lease. They've been leasing Huntley Middle School for 5 years as their Stevens building's been under construction. And we have collected upwards of, I believe it's been over $400,000 in rents through that lease agreement in the last 5 years. They are leaving. They are taking their sound, most of their electrical equipment, and things that have been in place for 5 years. With that, since that time, actually JJ mentioned about how we had to switch our radios because of the frequency changes that were required by FCC. NIU, their sound system was FCC compliant. They're now leaving, so we have to come forward and get ours up to speed, and that's a large portion of the money that's included in the $95,000 for the auditorium. If we want to even consider holding spring sings and performances and using it beyond just turn on the lights and stand up there with no sound, we have to do some upgrades to that auditorium, and we really, as an administration, would like to are planning to move our elementary spring sings to Huntley Middle School for the second semester, so that we can not have the high school auditorium so booked solid with events constantly to where we can't even get some high school events into there, as well as the wear and tear that it has on that building. We have another auditorium within our district that could be used for the same purpose.
So you could say, talking about community, we're a community with the doors and all that and safety. We're a community in this case, right? We're making an investment in the sound system, for instance, so that we can manage to continue at the high school, with these various events that are part of them, community events, and handle other events over here where this new sound system will go.
And our own Huntley students and staff will have the opportunity, and even in Clinton Rosette also, to have a middle school of the auditorium available to them for their school functions. So it goes well beyond just elementary kids using it or opening it up to the community. Because literally, if we don't do these improvements at the Huntley Middle School auditorium, we will only be able to turn on the lights and sit in the seats.
I just want to, I think it's important to make mention of these things, because when we asked for $110 million in the referendum many years ago, everybody said, why, what for? And this is very far downstream, admittedly, and I can't necessarily tie it directly to that $110 million. But my point all along has been, if you're going to spend money, make sure that the community gets some use out of it. So again, I think that this is, as you explained it, a good use of money, and goes even beyond just District 428 into the whole community.
And there are many other things on my list beyond just the Huntley Auditorium, but I felt it was important to explain that one in particular because it's somewhat.
Thanks.
So I have a question, brief one. What did we do with the rent money? Where did it go into? What fund did the rent money go into?
In the same fund where this is coming, the expenditures are.
So basically, it's been in escrow, sort of, in
Yeah,
a
we're
kind of a
basically
weird way.
spending it, as well, but yeah, that's where the revenue is.
Right, so it's going into the same fund that we're getting back out of, to a certain extent.
And I will also mention a portion of that did pay for 2 additional custodians to work weekends to provide NIU the opportunity to be there on the weekends.
Right.
And it also gave us those 32 hours every single week paid for to do additional cleaning at our Huntley Middle School during that time.
Another question, please. Kevin, can you just kind of compare this against the previous year?
For requests.
For the operation.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Over the last 4 years, we actually, 4 years ago, Andrew Gorla at the time came forward, and it was when we were looking at rolling out Chromebooks, and said, we need to cut the operations and maintenance budget by $500,000 for the next 4 years. And we said, okay, we'll do whatever we can do to help out with that. Pretty quickly, we figured out that we couldn't do 500 a year. We could do 300 a year. We felt we were going to make every effort, so we did. The first 2 years, we kept our budget $300,000 less than originally was before that. Last year was our 3rd year, and if you remember, I came forward last year and was approved. $216,000 were approved for various expenditures, including the mobile at Little John, the lead in the water testing, and some other requirements that we really did. 5 new classrooms of furniture, some of those other things that we really didn't have a choice. So now we're entering our 4th year of that agreement of reducing our budget by what is now $300,000, and we have delayed maintenance now on many things for now entering our 4th year. We have carpets around our buildings that need replacing. We have doors, wood doors that are very old and are having trouble closing because of the way they swell. And then you have issues with locking them, and then you get into safety issues. We have windows that the seals are broken, so then you have energy efficiency issues. These are
Is this
things.
cross-district or is this specific?
Depending on the topic, it's specific to certain buildings, but it is across the district. You know, we have buildings that are similar age when you look at Lincoln, Jefferson, Little John,
Founders.
Most of the ones that are not the brand new buildings, you know, if it's not Brooks, Cortland, and the high school, it is on the older end, and there is something that needs to be done that for years we've looked at for the last several years and said, well, it's cosmetic, it hasn't created a safety concern. So for now, unless it breaks or there's a safety issue like a tripping hazard, a carpet that's torn, we just let it be. But at some point, we have to make some conscious decisions to put some money forth to do those things. And that's what I'm proposing here with putting, I believe, $50,000 towards carpets. Now, that's not going to do the whole district. I'm going to figure out how many classrooms I can get done for $50,000 and start trying to get $50,000 a year, if you'll allow me, to replace carpets until we get to a point that we are finally at a point that literally we're not on threats. So that's one example.
One thing that thank you very much for taking me on a tour of Founders when we were looking at the need for redoing some of the doors, redoing some of that kind of stuff. So that's something that you're going to be taking a look at cross-district, and you're going to be, have you slotted that for Founders? Have you got a certain amount for Founders? Right?
Not a specific amount. What I'm asking for is a specific amount for the district, and then we will be looking at all, you know, the doors at Founders, the doors at Little John, no matter where they are, and saying, what can we do? Do they need to be replaced? Do they need to be sanded, painted, stained? What is the best option? And we have X amount of dollars, and start spreading that out into the buildings that are in the worst shape when it comes to the carpets or the doors or the windows, and trying to start ticking away at these projects, because we haven't been able to do that with the reduced budget over the last several years.
It's a certain amount of triage. In other words, you're going to be having to do that here, carpets, like you just pointed out.
One more question.
No, it's not a question, it's a comment for Jeff, because you weren't here when this happened, but when I was on the FFAC and we got the $21 million grant, there was a group that got together and looked at how that could be spent. And going further back, much further back actually, when Don Biggs was here as a director of facilities, he put together a book with Tammy. You know, it's like that thick, and it was about every building. You know, the first thing that was multiplied by the old grade school, get rid of that one. You know, and then over in Cortland, the old elementary. When I was on that $21 million committee, I want to put every drop of that in the facility, in the brick and mortar. And there were a couple bankers on that, and fortunately, and they said, man, maybe not all of that should go to the facility. And Cindy will attest, I'm sure, that you know, part of their idea as bankers on that committee, subcommittee, definitely about the advice of the board at the time. It was, you better keep some of that for the fund, you know, for the fund balance, right? Because hard times may be coming, and in fact, that is what happened. So there's always more. It's it's a black hole. There's always more money that needs to be spent on facility, and we just do the best we can.
If we don't maintain them, then they're gonna fall down.
Yeah.
And we have to do that.
And recently, an awful lot of money, big money, has been spent on boilers, HVAC, roofs, parking lots, as we heard tonight.
Secure entrances.
Secure entrances.
And it's gonna be hard to make everybody happy.
That's right.
All right, we've got several more items to get.
Yeah.
Okay.
Roll call.
Carrie Malek,
Yes.
Lori Newport,
Yes.
Yes.
Valerie Finney Hernandez,
Yeah.
Howard Zolman.
Yes.
Jeff Albright.
Yes.
Get everybody once. Okay. All right, next we have request to bid custodial supplies. This is an informational item.
Real quick, we always are looking for ways to save money, so all I'm asking is that I have the opportunity to go out to bid for our custodial supplies. We spend approximately $15,000 a month on custodial supplies across the district. We want to make sure we're getting the best bang for our buck.
So
So do we have a consensus for,
Second.
all right, we've got a consensus. Next, we have new business and administration, school counseling summer hours. This is an action item. That the Board of Education approve the high school counseling hours, 90 hours per counselor at a per diem rate for the 2018 summer session. Do we have a motion?
Second.
All right, discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Valerie Finney Hernandez.
Yeah.
Howard Zolman,
Yes.
Jeff Albright,
Abstain.
Carrie Malek,
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes. Next, we have middle school summer work for middle school counselors. This is an action item. That the Board of Education approve the proposed summer hours for the middle school counselors at approximate cost of $9,875. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Howard Zolman,
Yes.
Jeff Albright,
Yes.
Carrie Malek,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Finney Hernandez.
Yes. Next, we have update Title I math interventionist at the middle schools, and this is an informational item.
In February and into March, we discussed with the board adding FTEs, and our final recommendation came with the 11 approved FTEs. Then we also had 3 or 3 FTEs that were contingent on title funds or grant funds, and he has been working and has identified title dollars to support moving forward with the math interventionists for middle school. So I just wanted to provide an update.
Right, to provide you an update, because originally reallocated Title I funds were going to allow for 1 math interventionist at the middle school for next year. This is FTE neutral. This would not come out of the budget. However, I'm working with Kim Lyle, because we've been in a process really for 2 years that we've been talking about moving some of these Title I funds that have been exclusively in elementary into secondary over the last 2 years. And in the process of reallocating funds at the elementary, we discovered that actually there'll be enough funds that we can anticipate having 2 math interventionists instead of 1 at the middle school for next year.
This is from Grant.
From Title I.
It's all Title I.
It's all Title I. At present, Kim, how many individuals at the elementary receive their salaries through?
We have 23 people in our grants. We either support them 25% all the way up to 50% of their salary and benefits.
And can I ask a question? Aren't we to the point now with the Fed where we're able to spend this money across the district? Isn't there a requirement that you have to have so many percent of free reduced lunch or something like that?
The amount is the amount for Title I. The amount is determined by the number of free and reduced, that percentage of free and reduced within the district. But the grant historically has been written and spent strictly at the elementary level. Starting about 1.5 years ago, we started in slow steps, starting to look at how we can reallocate some of those funds through a pretty involved process that's driven by the federal government and ISB, where we can begin to start spreading some of that support, that financial support at the secondary level.
So the difference is between a targeted and a school-wide program.
Right.
Okay.
So we've been at
More
targeted.
flexibility than we had.
Oh, big time, yeah. So this year we've just been targeted. So all we did this year at the middle school level was pilot some math intervention programs. And the targeted means we can only apply them to students who've been identified most at risk academically. Now, after completing that, we're almost to the end of our first year at the middle school level. We'll be able to go school-wide, and that's what's going to allow us the flexibility to provide much more widespread support. And the middle schools identified a year and a half ago the area where they wanted to focus on was math and math support for students.
Okay, thanks for this.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Next, we have intergovernmental agreement with the City of Dekalb for School and Municipal Corporation, and this is an informational.
Well, over the past several months, Tammy and Cindy and I have been working with city staff, specifically mostly with Chief Lowry, on updating our agreement. Our agreement includes the student resource officers, our reciprocal reporting obligations, crossing guard agreement, which expires this year, our water tower district logo, and our security camera access. Again, we've met multiple times. The agreement has been exchanged through both councils, and we've finally arrived at a point where we're ready to present to the board, and they will in return present to the city council at their next meeting. So really the only big thing to report coming out of here, I guess, are two things. One is mentioned, and Cindy will talk about this later, that the city will no longer be in the crossing guard business. That will now become the school districts after this year is over. And we did do a lot of work on the security camera access, and this really ties into the ALICE training. And as Officer Jacques was saying, getting information to our first responders immediately. And basically the security camera access is that in the event that an emergency is reported or comes over the police radios, that they can immediately pull up our school security access system. And they can then track where the bad guy is. If there's a bad guy in the building, they can be viewing that in real time from police headquarters and be talking with and dispatching the officers as they're en route to the building. So that was probably where we spent the most time, at least, the attorneys, making sure that that language was cleaned up. And a little bit again with the student resource officer, but the language is clean, ready to go.
There hardware that goes along with that. There must be something to transfer the information to their system, I would think.
Then it's actually fairly simple, isn't it?
Yep. So we're going to be setting up VPN access individually for those individuals who need to have that access, and then we'll have them also in Active Directory. So in case they move on from the city or things like that, we can disable them, have controls in place. But yeah.
Great.
I got a question, Jamie. When I read through the IGA respecting the SROs, I noticed they're under dual supervision. Could you kind of clarify? I'm looking at it right now here. It says shall be supervised by designated chief, and functional supervision shall lie with the principal of the building in question. So what does functional supervision mean?
Well, in other words, if we had concerns about how one of our SROs were performing their job duties, we would then report that and sit down and talk to Chief Lowry. So, they're spending approximately 75% of their time with us. And again, we want to have that harmonious relationship. And if in fact if we had reason to be concerned, then we would sit down with Chief Lowry.
Okay.
Ultimately, he is their boss.
Yeah, that's what I was concerned about. When I didn't quite understand functional in this context. Clearly, he's the expert. Right?
Yes.
The chief is the expert, and our SROs report to the chief and get instruction from the chief. the superintendent, or rather, I'm sorry, the building principal might have something to say about, we need help here, or so on. Okay, thank you. They were pretty good.
Well, and, throughout the day, and JJ and Officer Lockhart can speak to this much better than I, but they're obviously not just stationed in one place all day.
Yeah.
They're all over our district, working with our kids and our teachers, and it's a great relationship. I'm very happy that we have this relationship, and would never want to be without it.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is the right time to say it, but I'm really thankful for the department, for the police department and other departments in town and the county here, particularly last week when we had the student protest or demonstration. They were, to me, a great ease of my mind to know that we had multiple staff department folks there to handle the issues that might have arisen or not. So kudos to those guys in our police departments, and also to those administrators that are there and step in and watch out for the kids.
I have a question regarding crossing guard. I won't be long. Are we?
That's
next
the
item.
next item. Next, we have request for proposal crossing guards, and this is an informational item.
So in light of the intergovernmental agreement, and like Jamie mentioned, in the past, the city has provided crossing guards to the district at their expense. And last year, they did approach us and said, we want to get out of the crossing guard business, basically. And they gave us a transition period where what they did is they went out for a request for proposal to have crossing guard services be contracted rather than the police department handling it. Because it was difficult for them to manage that program with police officers as well. So they did that request for proposal. They are currently using Andy Frame Services for those contracted services. And honestly, it's worked out really well from what I can tell. We've had a lot of, they've been worked really well with us. Haven't really heard any complaints at all. So it's really been a good relationship. Since it's a contract with the city and not with the district, we will have to go out for an RFP on our own to contract those services. So we'll be going through that process as well. And the city has given us all their basically template. So Tammy's going to help me out with the process because she's the expert on RFPs, and we'll get that rolling. So it's in conjunction with this intergovernmental agreement as well.
So that we did an interim period where they went to using Andy Frame.
Yes.
And do we have any idea of how much they paid for that service during the test year?
About $98,000.
$98,000.
And we anticipate it'll probably be somewhat of the same. And that's based on the numbers of corners that right now that we service. We're going to look at too, do we want to look at additional 1 or 2 corners? I know there's an issue at Clinton Rosette, an area where the kids like to cross that. As much as you tell them don't do it, it's a very dangerous area that intersects kind of that between 4th and
The back,
1st.
right, the back parking lot exit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always a tough one because the kids like to just go across there and not really listen well. So we'll look at that too, basically what we have now, and then if you want to add some, what would that cost? And then that's already been incorporated in our budget as well, I think. So,
I have a point. I live just down from the high school. Coming up Normal to Dresser, there's an intersection where they cross going to the high school along Normal and then follow the sidewalk going to the high school. There's nothing there. No crossing guard, nothing there. My question is, if we went to the city, which I talked to Chief Lowry about, if we went to the city and said, we need a blinking yellow light access there.
We're working on it.
Okay,
Yeah, there's actually a blinking street lights, and it says that you are supposed to stop for anybody in the crosswalk there. That was added this year. And that was added this year by the city. And we have talked to the city about potential other options, but at this point, they aren't planning any changes like a specific crossing signal or a traffic light. So we will continue with those discussions. It may be an intersection we maybe look at as a crossing guard option. We're going to look at all the data of how many kids cross where and make the decision for the best
I know that Chief Lowry is very sympathetic to that, and he is very, very much an advocate for those particular kinds of, that particular kind of hardware. And I would suggest another place to do that would be at the bridge on Hillcrest, where the bike path comes from off of Clinton Rosette. I see children, there's incidentally bikers and other people that use that as well, but I see children at after school crossing to go across Hillcrest at that point. It's an incredibly dangerous place to do that.
We'll be looking at all those options
Good,
as we
thank
put together a plan and a proposal.
Yeah, thank you.
I got a question. It's curiosity more than anything else. How much do we spend for buses and all that service for our bus students?
In totality,
Yeah, just roughly.
about 5 million.
Okay, so this is 100,000 against 5 million. And how many locations does this cover?
It's about 16, yeah.
16, really, wow.
And then, yeah, for elementary, mostly elementary, middle school.
And do we have anything in Portland or Malta, crossing guards?
Portland, no, because everybody pretty much gets bused. Because there's really no law.
Yeah.
Malta's
Right.
very similar as well, so really.
Yeah,
those aren't-
yeah, I didn't think the word was.
Yeah, that would be And having the crossing guards takes care of a hazard crossing, so you do not have kids there within that one.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much.
Okay, and with that, the meeting will be adjourned. All in favor?
Nay.
Stay.
All these things here.